Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm previewing yet another upcoming Tier 8 premium tank. This time, however, it's British, which is at least a little interesting because the only other Tier 8 British premium tank that's in the game is the FV4202, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. This is the Centurion Mark 5/1, and it's basically like a standard Centurion that has a better engine and better hull armor. Ooh, overpowered? Well, we're going to have to see in this preview. Stick around, I'm going to fully compare this tank to the other load of Tier 8 Centurions in the game and follow it up with some Ace Tanker and give you a few tips and tricks about the vehicle, especially about how you can deal with its frontal armor for inevitably when they start to fill the matchmaker soon. So before we get stuck into the statistics, I want to show you the armor model of the Centurion 5.1, and that's because I think it's pretty darn good looking. A lot like the Primo Victoria, I guess, for non-Sabaton fans. One thing that will be immediately noticeable is that it has a searchlight on the front of the tank and also that it is missing the side skirts here. Now, as far as I can work out, that's because the Australians had bad experiences with them in Vietnam, where it was muddy, dense vegetation and laden with mines. But as far as I can work out with the armor models, it doesn't really look like the standard Centurion has any spaced armor protection here anyway. Other things to notice about the Centurion 5.1 is there is a machine gun on top of the vehicle, and there's also a 100-gallon fuel tank on the back. However, I did do some testing and this doesn't count as an armor model, thankfully. Otherwise, boy, would that be a drawback. Crew-wise, you can use any of your British medium tank crews in this vehicle, but keep in mind that the radio operator is the loader on this vehicle, and so you want to have situational awareness on him and not on your commander. So now let's see how this vehicle holds up statistically compared to the standard Centurion 1, the FV4202, and the Primo Victoria, that Swedish Centurion. And I'm not going to go into great detail here because, as you can see, it's very, very similar. Firstly, the tank comes equipped with a 20-pounder main armament, and one of the best things about this is the standard penetration is exceptionally high for a medium vehicle at 226. That's one of the specialties of the British Tier 8 medium tanks. And while the rate of fire is 8 rounds a minute, the same as the Centurion, and much better than the FV4202, the downside is only 230 alpha damage when some other Tier 8 medium tanks are starting to pack 250 or even more. Now, one thing to keep in mind that the standard shells on this vehicle are armor piercing, and so their shell velocity are much lower than the standard rounds on the Primo Victoria. And this can also be said for the premium rounds on the vehicle, and while the shell velocity does go up, not nearly as much as on the premium rounds on the Primo Victoria. So next up, let's take a look at the gun handling, and this vehicle is just better with regards to its dispersion values when it's moving and when it's turning the tank and also turning the turret. So advantage for the Centurion 5.1 here. So how about the mobility? Well, yet another advantage. The engine power on this vehicle is 950, slightly higher than that of the Primo Victoria and significantly higher than the Centurion by 200 horsepower. Although, I must clarify that the way that you upgrade engines on your standard tanks and how it affects the traverse speed of the vehicle, that actually means that this tank has worse traverse speed than the standard Centurion, even though its ground resistances are the same and it has the same tank traverse. And this engine power advantage will allow the vehicle to accelerate up slopes much faster and also be able to reach that 50 km/h top speed limit quicker on the flat, especially compared to the FV4202. Now onto armor, and this is where it's further good news for the Centurion 5.1. It has the same turret as the Centurion 1 and the Primo Victoria, and this is a good turret for a Tier 8 medium tank. You've pretty much got 250 millimeters of armor across the whole of the front of the turret, so it's only really Tier 9 tanks having 50-50 chance to go through you, and Tier 10 tanks firing premium rounds that are really going to contest the turret on this vehicle. But the key advantage here is that the Centurion 5.1 has 120.7 millimeters of frontal hull armor compared to the Centurion 76.2. And to show you this armor in action, Phil helped me out on the test server, and here we can see a Comet firing standard rounds at the upper plate of the Centurion 5.1, and every single time a standard round is bouncing off. Bish, bash, bosh across the front of the hull there. Now Phil is going to be firing standard rounds at the lower plate of the tank, and they're going to go through every single time. As we can clearly see here, a couple of googly eyes now on the lower plate of the Centurion's hull. And that's because it looks like this vehicle just kind of has an extra plate welded over the upper hull, a lot like you would have on the Super Conqueror, for example. Now Phil is going to be firing premium rounds at the upper hull of the Centurion. And as we can see, some of them are bouncing and some of them are going through. 2 have ricocheted, 3 have penetrated, and there's another ricochet. So it looks like the upper hull is about 200 millimeters of effective armor when you're not angling it. And that's great. That's really good against tier 6, tier 7 tanks, and even some tier 8 tanks. All of those rounds would have gone through the standard Centurion's hull pretty much every single time. And what's important to realize is this can give you a big advantage on a ridgeline. When you've got 10 degrees of gun depression, that means that you can expose your upper hull to your opponents, and it bounces off consistently. I'd say we've probably got about 250, maybe even more millimeters of effective armor when we're using our gun depression here, and yet we can see the entirety of the enemy vehicle. And so this means that unlike the standard Centurion, which can only ever expose its turret, the Centurion 5-1 can also expose its upper hull to be able to perhaps aim deeper on the enemy tank and avoid a shell into the turret and instead want to go into the hull armor. So apart from this, the Centurion 5-1 has slightly lower hit points than the Centurion and the Primo Victorian. It looks like its engine health is a little less as well. But when you think about it, 50 hit points doesn't really make up for all of the advantages that this vehicle has with regards to its power to weight, its gun handling, and that upper hull armor. And so frankly, this is kind of just a better Centurion. I don't like that wargaming. You have to give this tank some drawbacks. You can't keep releasing premium tanks that are just flat out better than your standard vehicles. But on the other hand, just because the Centurion 5-1 is marginally better than the Centurion, does that necessarily mean that it's an incredible tier 8 tank that is going to be the new meta? Well, I'm just not sure that that's going to be the case. But anyway, that's quite enough jibber jabber. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. So here we go, we're rolling out on Erlenberg, and we are in the worst possible matchmaking because we're playing on a test server, and the amount of tier 8 tanks playing on the test server are extremely limited. Nevertheless, we're just going to have to see how this vehicle holds up against the big boys on the enemy team, right? Because, if we're honest, on the live server, tier 8 matchmaking pretty much looks like this all the time anyway. Alright, so Erlenberg, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to make my way down the west, and I'm going to try and use these bushes over here in the trees to conceal my position and hopefully be able to engage my opponents at mid to long ranges, where I can hopefully, keep my armor thick over this ridge line and then be able to pick them apart with this 20-pounder. Now, the 20-pounder, it's always a tank gun that I've really enjoyed playing. You know what? Back in the day, I used to really enjoy using this 20-pounder on the Centurion 7-1 at tier 9. And that's because the 105mm on that tank never used to be really so good, at least until recently where they buffed the rate of fire on it. And the 20-pounder had this crazy aim time of 1.9 seconds, and I think it still does, and just a much better rate of fire, which allowed you to get your DPM up 25%. Oh, tree falls there. I'm not sure I'm looking at it. Looks like I'm changing some settings right now. Oh, I'm back. There we go. And now we're going to shoot against that standard B. That's the tier 9. Nearly said Czechoslovakian, Italian auto-reloading medium tank. Oh my word, all of these terms. I'm sure I'm going to mess this up. Going to have to try and keep up. But there you go. We tracked it. Standard B no more. Now, I'm firing at the tracks here of the Stridsvagn S1 with my armor-piercing round. That's because I'm never going to be able to penetrate because I need 91mm of gun caliber or heat rounds to be able to go through. However, my second round is a high explosive, and that splashes for 117, and then we finish off the Stridsvagn S1 with our final shot. Not too bad. Nice support roll there for the 5-1. Now, I feel like that flank is broken. Instead, I want to try and sweep across to the middle. And the mobility on this vehicle, as I mentioned, with that improved power to weight ratio, it's not too bad. And wow, I love the getting my tank wet. That sounds awful. Okay, I love getting vehicles wet in World of Tanks with the new 1.0 graphics, and now the snow all on the tracks, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I do like it. Alright, so Centurion 5-1 now working my way towards the middle of the map. Object 705 there, and a VK 100-01. But again, decent penetration of 226. I don't really feel the need to dab the 2 key like I would in maybe some of my other tier 8 medium tanks that are packing 200 or sub 200 penetration. So we fluff a shell there, looks like into the rocks, and I'm a bit disappointed with that because that would look like such an easy shot into the turret of the VK 100-01. Nevertheless, I'm going to get forward, going to try and sling one into the back of the turret. There you go, and we roll for 205. Yeah, feels a little bit lackluster, that 230 alpha damage, but you know what, I'm used to it with the FE4 202. Still can't believe that's the only tier 8 premium British vehicle, apart from, I guess, there's some kind of funky Centurion that you... Oh, no, sorry, it's like a Chieftain or something, a T95 Chieftain that you can get as a Clan Ward's reward tank, which is pretty much irrelevant. Okay, so we put our first penetrating round through the side of the 705A there. I'm thinking about tracking him to try and get the assistance damage for the ISU-152, and this ISU-152 kind of overshoots the tank there just a little bit. So there you go, right into the back of the vehicle, but unfortunately I missed the track. The 705 decides to kill the ISU-152, quite rightly so, and there you go, I'll take his tracks off on the front. I know that there's a Borsig shooting me in the side, so I'm going to reverse up here to try and avoid some shells. The artillery splashes me, stunning my crew. A quick dab of the 5 key gets my crew back in action, and there you go, 2,400 assistance damage because somebody just smashed the Borsig, and then somebody just also smashed the FV4005. Great stuff. And that's something that, of course, I didn't mention because the Centurion has great view range. The standard Centurion at 400 meters. This vehicle has 400 as well. And that's better than the FV4202, I believe, which has 390 meters view range. Oh gosh, I gotta just check this quickly. Oh no! Statistics fail. Oh, come on, scrubby baby. Yeah, 390 meters view range. And that's a big difference. 10 meters, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've got an exceptionally skilled crew, 10 meters difference can be the change that you can make on the vehicle from dropping coated optics and using vents instead. I really don't feel like even if you have an exceptionally skilled crew and you're willing to use something like putting in T on the tank, that you can afford to get away if you've got less than 400 meters view range with vents. But I think that the Centurion 5-1 should be able to do so. Alright, so 3,500 assistance, 2,000 damage. We've managed to block a shell there, a heat round from the T-54, not too bad. But our vehicle is almost mortally wounded. We've lost our gunner and our gun, so we've got a big old pineapple in the middle of our screen now that's going to be hard to be able to pick up any extra damage. T-95 seems to be chilling. You know what, it's a test server. I guess he's off to go do more important things. We get a little bit more assistance there. Going to try and shoot the back of the tank. Just locking him down, not actually damaging the T-95, and that's because I guess the hull is quite high up compared to the tracks on that tank. But around into the top of the vehicle there, doing a little bit of damage before he falls victim to the Object 430U. And we've managed to get our crew and our gun back into effect to try and hound down this artillery at the end of the game. The 430U blind fires. I'm going to make my way over the ridge, and the WZ-111GFT secures me another 450 spotting damage. And so all in all, a great round here for the Centurion 5-1. This was 7,000 combined. On closer inspection of the resupply cost, considering I spent 14,000 on ammunition, looks like I fired maybe 1 or 2, maybe at the T-54, which as we can see was clearly doing the same to me. So make 108,000 credits profit, and we finished top of the team with 1,524 base experience. And it should be mentioned that the ammunition on this tank can certainly add up. 680 is not bad as long as you only fire standard rounds, but it's definitely not dirt cheap, and so you don't want to be just firing them in willy-nilly, as something like a Panzer 58 Mutz has a shell cost of 300, which is less than half that of the Centurion. And so if you're a free-to-play player, that's definitely something to take into account. But then again, I think the penetration advantage that this vehicle has with 226 on its standard rounds will probably kind of make up this difference. And so ladies and gents, that is the 5-1. It's pretty much just a better Centurion, which is a policy that I can never agree with from Wargaming. They should have given it some kind of surely a disadvantage if it's a heavier tank because it's got that extra plate welded on the front. Maybe it should have been slower instead, or had really bad ground resistances or something to balance it. And disappointingly, as of yet, Wargaming haven't announced any of their plans for this vehicle, apart from teasing it on their Facebook page and saying it's going to be coming soon. Nevertheless, it's a tier 8 British premium tank. I can't complain. There really aren't enough of them in the game, and Wargaming just keep holding back the Carnarvon Action 10 for some unknown reason. And I think if I probably had this, I'd start playing my Super Conqueror a little bit more. But anyway, that's it for today. I hope this video was useful for you, or maybe you just enjoyed it. If it was, please give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down, and let me know in the comments what you think about the Centurion 5-1. Are you going to be picking it up, or are you kind of feeling tier 8 premium tank burnout, especially after the Progetto, which I think a lot of people picked up? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.